Let's go ahead and talk now, since we've looked at what the Cartesian coordinate system is. We've done a little bit of a review about that in a previous area of notes in Blackboard. How do we input our points, knowing what the x, y, and z values are? So again, first, just a slight review. On your drawing screen, you may have a grid already stationed. If you look, you have the user coordinate icon, or what we call the UCS, with the X and the Y showing. And in that corner, you may also scroll and see you have a red line and a green line that are running parallel to the axis. Those are representing the X and the Y. Where those two cross is going to be the origin of 0, 0. So when you're thinking about Cartesian coordinate system, you're graphing based on the x-axis, y-axis direction. It could be all positive, it could be positive and negative combinations, it could be all negative. But those values are always in relationship to where is that 0, 0 point. We refer to this method as absolute. So if I'm taking a point, here is my 0, 0. Let's say I'm going over 3 and up 2. I could either use my grid, or I could actually type in 3, 2. Your boxes on your screen, when we get to the next screen, we're going to talk about the dynamic input. Those boxes, if they're on, are waiting for you to input the values. So when you type in your first number for x and you hit the comma, it will separate into the second box, which is your y value. So let's make sure you know how to turn that dynamic input tool on. Along your status bar, you have this dynamic input button. When it's gray, like it is currently on the screen, it's turned off. When you touch it with your cursor, turns it back on, it'll then be blue. And again, on your screen, if you'll notice in the examples here, you can change the settings to this, but that's showing you how the values are going to show up. It'll give you the X box, it'll give you a Y box. If you're dragging your cursor, it'll also give you the distance between points, which will also be handy when we talk about one of these next particular values. It also shows you prompts. It's using your command line prompts to show you the questions or the information it's requesting out from you. If you wanted to modify any of this, if you click again here at the grid and snap, brings up a menu called Snap Settings, takes you to the snapping grid. You just go across the top to the tabs until you see Dynamic Input and select, and then you can make these revisions. So the second method of inputting values after you've learned how to just simply graph using absolute from 0, 0, this one is called relative. And in this one, we no longer care about where 0, 0 is. If I have a point sitting where my cursor is showing on the screen, and I want to go over 3 and up 2, I'm no longer thinking about where is that in relationship to 0, 0. I'm thinking about where is it in relationship to that last point. So we call it relative. It's relative to the last point drawn. Now my values, my x and y, may still very well be 3, 2, to get me to that particular point. But in some systems, I may have to type in the @ symbol that you see here. I may have to type in that symbol before that so it recognizes relative. Sometimes the system is in relative and they want to recognize the absolute. And if that's the case, you would put the hashtag or the number sign in front of your x, y. So if I were moving in a horizontal direction, there is no y movement. So those values would simply be whatever the x is, 0. If I were moving vertically, then it would be, if I were moving in the x-axis, the 0 would be in the x, whatever the y value is. If I'm moving vertically, it would be no x movement, 0, whatever the y value is. Again, still could be positive and could be negative. Then the last value that we would look at would be polar, where we're still looking at it from a previous point. So say where my cursor is, but I'm wanting to drag a line that goes up this way at a 45-degree angle. So again, your dynamic input can show you that, but you're basing it on the way AutoCAD feeds your angles, from 0 being horizontal, x-axis, counterclockwise all the way back around. So if you're doing that, what they're looking for is, in the first box, what distance value are you trying to have? And then you would use your less than symbol to identify in AutoCAD that you're getting ready to feed it an angle. And your next value would be a 45-degree angle. That is how the polar works. So you have absolute, relative, and polar ways to input your values to go from point to point to point in your drawings.